Hi, I'm Ariel from Present Tense, and today we're going to be learning about how to coach someone or understand the purpose of the social impact business model deliverable. Now, why did we call it the social impact business model deliverable? Well, the reason that we called it a social impact or business model deliverable is that for the for-profit, you're building a business model. For the nonprofit, you're figuring out your social impact. But for social entrepreneurs, you want to know how are you doing the double bottom line? How are you impacting society and making a little bit of income while you're doing it? Well, this deliverable is meant to do that. Until now, the fellows have been involved in a very important research process. The first deliverables are involved in visioning, understanding what's the world they're trying to change and what the world they want to create is, and who are the people that are going to be helping them in their programs do that work. Then valuing, that is understanding the value proposition to those people. What's in it for them? Why are they going to help? And then finally, environmental scanning, understanding who are the people, who are the other players in the field, and what are they trying to do in order to solve similar problems? Well, after all that research, which we call the inspiration phase, if you want to use design thinking terminology, we move into the ideation phase. Now, ideation is taking all that information and making it something. The way that we do that to concretize these great ideas and amazing imaginations is we use something called a logic model, but we tweak it, and that's what creates the business model. So what's a logic model? A logic model is kind of like a flow between one thing. If you do one thing, you get another thing, and you get to a final impact. Well, we kind of look at it as a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, shining very bright, is what the outcome is. That is, if your purpose is to create a better world by reducing poverty in the Brookline neighborhood of Boston, well, you got to do a few things in order to get to that point. But your purpose is that reduction of poverty. To get there, first and foremost, you need to have a bunch of outputs. That is, something has to happen, physical, that you can touch, that you can see, or more importantly, that you can measure, that gets to those outcomes. These outputs should be what is known by the acronym of SMART. They're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they are realistic, and they're time-bound. So let's use our example. If we're trying to eliminate poverty in the Brookline area of Boston, well, how are we going to figure out how to measure that? What we could do is create an output that we're measuring. So let's say 100 people who are below the poverty line within the next 3 months get jobs that they hold for a minimum of 3 weeks. And now when you do that, you say in the next 4 months, we are going to specifically target 100 people below the poverty line who get a job and hold it for a minimum of 3 weeks. So it's specific, measurable, attainable, we hope, realistic or reasonable, I think so, and time-bound. Well, let's move on. In order to get these outputs, you need to first come up with a bunch of activities that does it. You don't create 100 people with jobs out in midair. And those activities are often what a venture is all about. That is, when someone applies to a fellowship program, they apply by saying they're going to develop mural programs to get kids out and beautifying the neighborhood, or they're going to be motivating young business people to help provide small business coaching to convicts in prison. Well, those are the activities that people do in order to get to those outputs. And without knowing what those activities are, you can't know what those outputs are, right? So we started off with the outcome, realizing what we want to do. We moved down to the outputs, what we're going to be measuring that this is actually happening. Then we decided what activities are going to create those outputs. Then finally, we come up with the inputs. What are the resources that we need in order to get those things done, in order to get those things accomplished, in order for this to occur, right? Well, that's great. So we created a logical flow. And each one of these are chock full of assumptions. That is, this is our outcome, and we're assuming that by having these outputs, we're actually going to get this. And then we're assuming that with these activities, we're going to get to those outputs. And then we're assuming that with the right set of inputs, we're going to get those activities going, which are going to produce those outputs, which are going to lead to the outcome. If any link in this chain is broken, if the logic is off, our assumptions are wrong, the outcome doesn't happen, the project has to reconfigure itself. Let's not say fail. Often, by the way, such as with PayPal or with Post-it notes or whatnot, many times people who think they're starting off to do something end up doing something else, and that something else is just as good. So building it and learning from it is very important. Well, this deliverable doesn't stop with just figuring out that logic model or the business model, right? Saying that if I do these things, with these resources, I end up producing this, which is what people are going to be paying for and what's actually going to impact the world and create the outcome. What we do is we take it a step further by asking people to create a very quick and dirty budget. Now, quick and dirty budget, why? Because a budget, we want to get into the minds of fellows, is a planning tool. It's very nice for resource allocation, but really what it is to start thinking about what needs to happen when, under what circumstances. So the inputs become a budget line. And each one has a budget line. So we'll start off with materials, and then we'll go to salaries, and then we'll go to PR, and then miscellaneous whatnot. And then we ask the fellows to give us when, these are the months, when it is that they're actually going to be using these inputs. So let's say that materials, we need $2,000 in the first month, but we don't need any for following months. In salaries, we're not going to take any the first and second month, but we're going to take $700 the third month and $1,300 the fourth month. In PR, we're not going to take the first month, but we are going to want to put $1,000 into it the second month to tell people about our programs, and then we're going to keep a retainer of $100 just so people can do clippings and whatnot, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what that does is it forces the fellows to take this and actualize it in a planning form with the budget. Now, how this fits in with the beginning we talked about, because they came up with all these ideas which ended up being the outcome and ended up leading us to figure out all the rest. How this fits into the continuing is that the next deliverable forces them to develop a project plan from it. That is, take this rudimentary conception of what it is that they're doing when, and start building that out in terms of phases, in terms of what kind of activities they're doing when, and then finally a work plan from it internally, and an executive summary externally they can start raising capital from. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this helped, and feel free to ask us any questions at deliverables@presenttense.org, and we'll be happy to answer them.